So I chose to do my video on the French Revolution. Um, this was a revolution that I was initially interested in. It's frankly why I took your class, because I had played one of my favorite video games back in the day, or not back in the day, a couple of years ago, had used this as one of its backdrops, the Assassin's Creed series. So it was nice seeing all the characters come up again. And but yeah. So with that being said, I would just like to start with a quote that was actually in the beginning of the book that you assigned us. There is besides something special in this malady of the French Revolution that I feel without being able to describe it well or to analyze its causes. It is a virus of a new kind and an unknown kind. There were violent revolutions in the world, but the immoderate, violent, radical, desperate, audacious, almost mad, and none the less powerful and effective character of these revolutionaries is without precedent. It seems to me, in the great social agitations of past centuries, from whence came this new race? What produced it? What made it so effective? Was it perpetuating it? Now that quote kind of speaks to me in particular because it's kind of essentially what is so unique about the French Revolution and the American Revolution in two in the same, because you're dealing with the birth of a true republic at the time. That was the goal of a lot of these revolutionaries, was to overthrow the monarch that they saw was unfairly taxing them and making bad decisions based on the bourgeoisie and not the common people. There was people in the streets starving. There was bad things going on in France that a lot of these people got behind what these revolutionaries were saying and was okay with the violence and the things that came along with it because, well, we don't want to starve. We want to eat. We need bread, So a lot of these revolutions, mostly all of them, come from necessity. We saw that in the Russian Revolution and Russian Revolution too. If the need wasn't there for the social constructs to be reconformed, it wouldn't happen. There was already dissatisfaction with the old regime in Russia, like the old regime in France. So, and the majority of the woes that came from France was just you got to understand they just helped America get through the American Revolution, and that was not cheap. They provided a lot of things that helped us win the war, especially in the later part of it. So with all that money being spent, they're already breaking the bank. They're already on the verge of collapse, and it doesn't help matters because America's taking a little bit longer to start up. We're not, paying them back per se as well as we should, and the French people are just hurting. So there's a implementation of unfair tax systems in order to compensate for this. It's similar to what Britain went through in taxing the Americans. It wasn't that, they wanted to make money, but they just, again, fought a war to save these colonies, and they looked to the colonies and were like, hey, you guys should pay. We help defend you, you pay. Seems simple, but they kind of took it to an extreme, and certain people weren't happy with it, and we end up with the American Revolution. But another thing that kind of contributed to this whole worldwide thought was the Age of Enlightenment. We had a shift from, okay, these rulers that we see before us are deities, they're extensions of the religious entities, and they should be looked on as holy. And they should be respected because they are extensions of the Lord, the extensions of our religion. So with the Age of Enlightenment, we start to question religion and question the validity of these rulers. Are they doing the right things? Are they really benefiting the people as a whole? Not so much. So with the Age of Enlightenment and an unfair tax system And frankly, the American Revolution breaking the French bank, you have all the seeds kind of being planted for these revolutionaries to come in and say, hey, these guys don't know what they're doing, you know? So what followed all this discontent was initially what was called the Estates General, and this was not a very good assembly because it was basically um, heavily still geared towards the rich elite. So it wasn't really like the small guys were getting their say. Like the whole goal of this thing was to give everyone a fair say. That's what a republic stands for. But that small faction of the Estates General branched off and formed the National Assembly, and basically these groups of people cascaded to a bunch of different forms of it, and they eventually landed on the National Convention, which eventually turned into the Committee of Public Safety with Robespierre and obviously the Terror. But I'm going to read an excerpt from the book about the National Convention, and this was when it actually overthrew the monarchy. So when the National Convention convened in Paris 2 weeks later, it abolished the monarchy, and on September 22nd, 1792, established the first republic in French history. The republic would answer only to the people, not to a royal authority. The situation was dire. The deputies were supposed to draft a new constitution, even while fighting a war with external enemies and confronting increasing resistance to the revolution at home. See, that's the thing with this revolution. Once it got into it, they're not only fighting all this discontent at home, but they're really dealing with a war exterior to them, all around them. So they're trying to fight a battle at home and then maintain a war of conquest, and it's kind of a difficult battle. So, and not to mention King Louis had some friends in high places that really didn't want to see him, frankly, dethroned. So when that finally happened, people weren't happy. So, but initially, they signed a constitution that, I'm kind of backtracking here, that did not really guarantee slaves or women rights. It was the Declaration of Man and the Rights of Man and Citizen. It was a reflection of the American Constitution, but it didn't, kind of like ours, really didn't include everyone. It was more like, okay, just if you're white and you're rich, then you have rights. But not everyone else was guaranteed. So, interestingly enough, the women marched on Versailles, and they forced the king out of his hiding place. So I'm just going to do a quick wrap-up. I'm about at the 8-minute mark, so I apologize. This is going a little bit longer. The king was eventually, he was executed, and after his execution, that's really when the terror really got out of hand. They were really killing people for absolutely anything. You know, if you were against the Jacobins, one of the main groups in this revolution that was taking this out, and Robespierre, you were executed. You know, even Danton, one of the champions of the revolution, maybe even more so than Robespierre, he actually embodied the more contemporary versions of what the revolution was kind of trying to be. Robespierre kind of turned into this fearmonger dictator that really was more into his own grandstanding and making himself better. It really wasn't about the Republic. He might have started out like that with the Committee of Public Safety, but definitely not towards the end. So out of all this, you come Napoleon Bonaparte enters the picture, and of course that's kind of the whole jinx of the French Revolution, that we wanted to get rid of this tyrannical leader, but then we end up with a military tyrannical leader. So it's really not that France changed itself all too much in these years, but the ideas were planted and the world took notice. The world looked and said, okay, maybe having a dictator or having a king, queen, this monarchy system is not that great. We should reform some of it. I mean, even in the Russian Revolution, they looked back to the French Revolution and tried to kind of continue what had happened there. Karl Marx was really a fan of the French Revolution, and so was a lot of the other Stalin, Lenin, and whatnot. So the French Revolution was very important in that sense that it did not accomplish what it set out to do, but the ideas that it brought forth reverberated throughout the world, and it really kind of furthered what America had tried to do, and they tried to do it, and they tried to put a lot more radical things in that I can't really cover in 8 minutes, but yeah, it was an amazing revolution, and really interesting to learn more about it. And I enjoyed being in your class, and thank you very much. Bye.